Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting right here in the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey pretty much since the beginning. So that's a few years now. So thank you, Folgers. We are so grateful and humbled to have you on board with us. Thank you. Also, big thank you to award-winning composer, Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, for our intro and our outro. That's the voice and the music that you hear on the intro you just heard. So check him out anywhere that you like to stream your favorite music. Also, big thank you to horror artist Steve McGinnis, who is the man behind the banners and the logos here at the Outer Realm. So check him out on Facebook and Instagram. He does a lot of commission pieces and just does amazing work. So thank you to Steve McGinnis. Tonight, we have the amazing Philip Kinsella with us, and I always look forward to having him on board. He's a wealth of information, and he's always delightful to sit and share space with. And he's going to be discussing his personal experiences with, being an abduction. I mean, I'm always funny with the word abduction because some people tell me that's not appropriate. I think it's appropriate when they're coming into your personal space. But with that being said, there's some people who have really amazing experiences, and I've had amazing experiences as well once I got over the initial shock of everything else. Anyway, he's also going to be discussing his upcoming book, Terrestrial Trespassers. So tune in, get yourselves all settled, and let's welcome Philip Kinsella, all the way from the UK, by the way. Hello.
Hello, Michelle. How are you? And thank you very much for that amazing, glowing reference there about you. I mean, I always see us as all very important and amazing beings anyway, but thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being here. I love to share space with you. I love being around like-minded people, and I love listening to their stories and their expertise on it. I mean, I suppose as expert as you can be in a field that is so, I mean, let's face it, it's like any other field of high strangeness. It's just, there's nothing concrete with it. It's just all about the research or whatever you can find that resembles any little bit of being authentic. So
yes, absolutely. Theoretical content is all that we have. And I think, and I've always stated that no matter what models we bring to the table, they are theoretical in nature. And I've always said that no one has exclusive rights to the phenomenon, and that we must be very careful because, there could be someone else who's right on the ball and got it right, yet we don't know. But we will be talking about certain patterns that we're looking into in order to ascertain what it is that the phenomena represents on multiple levels of reality. And this is fascinating, and I think gives us hope because it stipulates that we are not the only intelligent life form within this infinite cosmos, and that there is more to us than a mere flesh and blood biological unit that we have been led to believe lives and merely dies. So we and you and many other good folk out there, researchers, are understanding of these facts. And I say facts because through our research, most certainly into not only ufology or cryptozoology, but also in NDE research, and the psychic component must be brought into the fray. And I've always argued this because consciousness seems to represent an enormous part to our journey. And just very quickly here, when I say consciousness, I'm not talking about something ethereal and wispy that can't be touched. Consciousness is the real essence of form, of what creates us here within this third dimensional matrix. So absolutely well said, Michelle, with regards to your analysis and determination of what it is that we may be dealing with. Yeah.
Thank you. It's, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because you've had an abduction experience and it's different for everyone. I looked at it that way as well because I found it so intrusive. And then I started realizing this has been happening to me since I was a child. It's been happening, it's a family thing. It's been going on for generations because I started asking questions, later on. And, I thought, this is abduction. But then, I started hearing theories about, well, no, this is you made this arrangement,
Yes,
as a soul being, as an energy being, your life hasn't always been human, and
that's right.
and you agreed to this. So I'm thinking, okay, so I started looking at it more like being an experiencer.
That's right.
So what are your thoughts on that? And then we can get into how it started, some of the
Yeah. What's interesting is that a lot of people, good folk who've had genuine experiences, and I have to use that word lightly, genuine, experiences with ETs, you'll normally find that the psychic component is enhanced. That is to say that their sixth sense is hugely expanded upon. I found the same thing with myself.
Yes.
To begin with, there was the UFO part, and this has been going on throughout my life. Not so much the abductions, although there was one main one in 1989 that we'll get to shortly.
Okay.
But there are other experiences, levels of high strangeness, which now in my 50s, we all can look back and kind of like look at the whole process differently. And in terms of the soul consciousness, absolutely, I have this absolute fascination for survival evidence. That is why I claim nothing, but I am what they call a medium. I prefer the word translator because what we're merely doing is decoding information from a higher source of energy, rather like the signals going into a mobile phone. You've got the hardware, you've got the software that you can't see, which is the phone, mapping and creating information that's coming through the mechanism. And we always look at ourselves as human.
Yes.
And we are beginning to realize that, that there are multiple levels of reality which exist beyond our sixth sense of awareness to a degree until it comes into our awareness, into our matrix. And this begs the question of us looking at ourselves as mere humans, because as you quite rightfully said, on a soul level, we are, I believe, multi-complexed. And I've often wondered, Michelle, that even on the last sighting, which had been recorded and filmed and also analyzed and researched with mine and my twin brother's last sighting of 3 magnificent, huge UFOs on the 9th of April 2016 at precisely 11:15 p.m. at night here, they were tracked all the way from the Isles of Scilly. I wondered, because another researcher, another top man, I can't mention his name, I'm not allowed to, but he suggested to me, he said, what would you think if you became aware of the fact that they were coming to see you in your human form and that you are part of them? And I thought, that is a very interesting theory.
It is. Yeah.
So I think on a multiple level of awareness that we are more than human. And you said about soul contracts. Well, my understanding is that we are eternal beings, and that we have gone through multitude forms of incarnations, not just in human form, perhaps in extraterrestrial form. I have some memories that have not been pulled through hypnosis, but memories of a place that is not here. And that we would consider very different from here. And I've often wondered with regards to that question. So absolutely, totally, that I think that, with us as human beings, biological, souls in a biological spacesuit going through this limited version of what we call time, when we are brought outside of time, it changes everything. And of course, the presence of extraterrestrial intelligence, when they remove us away from our time-based world, we are in a timeless state. And that's interesting, I think.
I think it's extremely interesting. I had a guest on last week, Reverend Barbara DeLong,
Mm.
and she made a reference to us as being avatars. She goes,
Yes.
we enter into our avatars, and I thought, that's actually an interesting way of putting it. The physical. Goes, when we're done here, you go on to your point of destination,
Yeah.
and I thought,
Yes.
yeah, I believe that 100%.
I also feel, just to add in here, Michelle, before I
Mhm.
forget, because
Of
sometimes we
course,
all get ideas
it's
and then
your
we forget
show.
them,
You jump in
is
whenever.
I've often thought about why we come down here, and I've often
Mm.
joked that I say that when I get over there, I'm going to get a refund and ask them what the hell was that
I
on
was
earth
tricked.
all about.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it could be that we are all collating information. We're creating our own realities, and that we are part of this
Yes.
source of awareness that is building upon itself through an extension of us through these multiple experiences. It's rather like someone creating one film and then we get bored, we want to see another, and we see another. It's like music, we want many variations of these things. And I think that the one, whatever the one is that we're all part of, is perhaps expanding upon the process of creation of awareness through itself, through us as the avatars, as the
Yes.
extensions, as the probes, as
Yes.
the kind of like the explorers, as it were. And yes, it's
Yes.
harsh, it's a difficult world that we come into, but I know that there is another side because I've seen it on 2 occasions.
Mhm.
And it's nothing less than staggering. And what shocked me more than anything was the complete awareness of where I was from. I knew where I was from. It was like awakening. It was no big deal in the sense like, or it was like, well, I'm stripped of all those feelings that I had that bring me down here, that weigh me down, and now I'm free. So absolutely, I just wanted to add that little bit in there.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's important because right now we are in a day and age of, I guess, disclosure. I like to call it, maybe discovery for many. I think it's something that, I mean, let's face it, growing up in our era, it was, you don't talk about things like that.
Oh yes,
you know,
definitely.
no, we don't want to be those neighbors on the street. Stop it. So, so now, with the internet and with more people coming forward because of technology such as like phones and
Mm,
cameras, and it's a little bit harder to deny it's there. So I think you have some governments, etc., coming through and saying, okay, yes, it's a thing. And but we're that's a whole other type of show. But I
mm.
think because of the fact that it's out there now, it's important for people to realize that it doesn't all have to be terrifying, and
Oh,
it's part of our evolution, and we need to get an understanding of our neighbors, whether they come from the cosmos or whether they're here in our oceans, our mountains, underground.
mm,
Like
yes.
the ancients spoke of these people and existed, these individuals, and somewhere along the line that all changed and we became fearful.
Mm, that's right.
So,
I think we live by a system that creates that fear
yes, agreed.
and control, mental subjugation. And you're correct, Michelle. The advent of technology has allowed us to, in some instances,
Yes.
prove the existence of not only spirit form, but also what we call spirit form. It sounds very British and very Victorian. It's like some people sitting
I
under
love
the
it
table
though.
rapping it.
I do. You
But
guys started the
also,
whole movement, so you're allowed.
but also the ET hypothesis, which is interesting. Now, yes, there has been denial, and because people are able to connect on a huge level now with this technology.
Mm.
Secrets can't remain as secret as they once did, because in the heyday it was much easier to control human awareness through the newspapers, which were controlled, and television stations, where there was probably three here, BBC One, BBC Two, Channel 3, and maybe another one.
Right.
That was it.
Right.
And now people have resources where they're able to communicate. But what's interesting is that I think as we have evolved, I think the phenomena itself has evolved along that line. It's almost as if they're one step ahead of us. So the question is, are they progressing us towards a new level of reality? Are they helping us? Now, even with human beings, we have good people, good folk, we have the really bad folk. And Kathleen Marden, God love her, the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, herself a wonderful UFO researcher and author, investigator, an award-winning lady that she is. She did make me laugh once when she said, well, you have the good ETs, you have the bad ETs, and you have the rogues.
Yeah, that's right.
and this is why, people have kind of like, because I've centered a lot of my research into the abduction phenomena.
Yes.
And sometimes on levels that are not too nice to look at.
Sure.
You have to understand that I am for the good ET hypothesis as well. I have actually made mention in my books that I'm not here stating that the whole phenomena is evil.
Right.
I want to look at both sides of the coin here.
Course. Yes.
And understand with certain connections and links what it is that we're dealing with, because it's all very well us glossing things up, which is wonderful and good, but there is also another side, and that is the same for our system. You have all of us down here, many millions of people who are wonderful, loving, good folk who are opening their minds to a new reality, a new awareness, consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have those at the top, which we're beginning to find are highly structured and organized in trying to bring our mental subjugation to a level where we can't think. So there's this silent war, and it's psychological now. You don't need guns or car crashes now. It's just a system whereby we operate, and we're beginning to open up here.
Yes.
But the system is like trying to crush us down. So this ongoing war between good and evil.
It's the oldest story in the book.
Oh, absolutely, totally.
Yes.
Makes for a good book and a good film.
Oh, many times. Sure. So let's start with your experience then. I agree with you on, the abduction side of things, because it happens. It happens more times than people are even aware of, obviously.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
So let's start with your experience.
Yes. Well, we do know that there is an intergenerational link, and a lot of researchers have discovered this, which begs the question of what it is that these ETs are looking for. Is there something that is connected within our DNA or within the soul? We have to think about that as well too, because my understanding of these certain aliens, most notably the Greys, as they're called, are interested in what we represent on a reproductive species, which is individual. Now, I've had people telling me how it is and why it is. And I've always said, okay, you are entitled to your opinion, totally. But let me tell you, I don't have a clue. All I have is some theoretical content. I was awarded with a new theory, and it is just a theory with regards to the Greys, and also the interdimensional hypothesis. Now, what happened to me back in the winter of 1989, we lived in a small village called Marston Mortain, which is roughly about 5 miles outside of Bedfordshire. And at that time, I was 20, I didn't drive, I couldn't drive. I do now. I drive everyone mad, but anyway, there we are. But I had to come back from work, because I used to get the train from Bedford, and that would come into Millbrook, and I would walk the mile, well, a little bit more than a mile or so back home. And I got into the house. We lived in a semi-detached house. It was quite a big house. It had big extensions and big garden and everything, and the front was all glass. And I'd come into the house as I normally did. My mother was at work, and my brother and my sister were home with our dog. We had a dog called Benji. And I walked through the glass doors and through the hall and into the kitchen, and the glass doors to the kitchen were opened. And I leaned myself back against the sideboard where the breakfast bar was, because that led into the dining room and then the conservatory at the other side. And I was just leaning back, looking out to the hall. The dog was in front of me. My brother was ahead of me, so his line of sight to the hall was hidden because there was a wall there. He was in the dining area, just standing there looking. We were having a coffee, and my sister was by far left. It's important for you to dress where everyone was.
Okay.
So I'm just relaxing, and I just want a cup of coffee and just, chill after a long day at work. And all of a sudden, the atmosphere changed. It became electric. So I can still remember it. It was almost like I don't have hairs on my back, but the hairs on my neck and my arms started to stand up, and the dog started to react to something ahead of it. And I couldn't see anything there. And all of a sudden, my brother did something very unusual. He said, there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die. And as he said that, his head was like this, the ceiling. like he was in some kind of trance. And I thought, what on earth is he talking about? They were his exact words. There's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die. There was no earthquake, and our maternal grandmother at that point in time had still been very much alive. And I realized when I looked out to the hall that I'd just come through with the frosted glass doors to the front of the house, the glass doors and the windows there, there was this light, and I thought that it was a white light, and I thought that our mum had come back from work early, because she was on a late shift, and we had a driveway coming up to the property, and I realised that this wasn't the headlights to a car. What happened was that the light, for all intents and purposes, began to become brighter, and where the front door to the house was, the glass was starting to bend backwards and forwards, and the dog is starting to go mad. And my brother is still frozen, and I don't recall what happened to my sister. Maybe did they knock her out? Was she? I don't know. But as this was going on, part of my mind is thinking, this is not possible. This is not happening. It's impossible. But it was, because it was happening. And then I saw what I can only describe as a small being. It was 3 foot tall. It was all clad in black, complete black, like a one-piece uniform. It had what I thought from observation was like a big motorcycle helmet on its head, but it didn't have any marks or definitions. That too was black, but the actual helmet was bigger than in the proportion to its body. That came through the glass, which seemed pliable, and as soon as that happened, it ran ahead and disappeared into what then had been my brother's study/bedroom. And then the glass went back to normal, and I'm standing there. My brother came out of his trance, and I said, "There's an intruder in the house." And then I yelled, I think I screamed, there's an intruder in the house. And I put my hand behind me into the drawer and took out a knife, a big knife. And at that point, I saw this thing dart from the corner, because when it came in, there was another part of the house that went forward to the area where our bedroom/study was. So it came around that corner and ran across the hall and up the stairs and disappeared. And we checked the house, there was nothing. And I remembered breaking down thinking, this is impossible. I couldn't get my head around the fact that this had happened. Well, why did it happen? There was no sense to it in anything that I was watching or observing. But the worst part was to come, and this is what led me eventually into trying to determine, after all these years, what it was that happened to me. And I'm going to explain about the abduction now. But there is another researcher. I can't say too much about what he's discovered.
Of course. Sure.
But Pierre Sabat, brilliant author, and he's pieced together, I think, a lot of information about what he feels have been behind this on a theoretical level. That's why I always say to people, keep your experiences as they happen. Don't add or subtract anything. Just bring through what you remembered. Now, I remembered every part of my abduction, whereas some people don't. So in the early hours of that morning, I then found myself floating on my back in the area, the hall, 3 foot off the floor to where that thing had come through the door. So I'm floating on my back, and my head is facing on my back the glass. This is all to do with glass doors, all to do with doors, openings. And where my head is positioned as I'm floating, I awaken and I'm like, what on earth is happening to me? And I'm being pulled invisibly through the glass to the kitchen door. So as I'm coming through them, I'm thinking, there's no way I'm able to get through solid matter. We are biological and this is material. There's no way that there can be an interaction between the two, yet I'm going through it. And it was dark. I don't know what time it was. There was no clock that I could see. It must have been the early hours of the morning, because it was quite dark. And as I was pulled through to the kitchen on my back, I was kind of pulled round. I could see the dog asleep, so the dog wasn't even aware that I was there. And then I was pulled through the kitchen, through to the conservatory, and then out of the conservatory doors and out to the garden. Now, we had a big garden with a big pond and a patio, and down the end was an aviary, and it was quite a long garden. And as I came out into the garden, as I was pulled out to the garden on my back, I was then elevated up. So I was in a standing position, but still 3 feet off the floor. It's quite high up. And when I looked up at the sky, there were these lights, all these UFOs moving. And I remembered at that point thinking, oh my God, they're real. They exist. What is everyone making such a big deal about them? There they are. They're here. But there
Right.
was one object that wasn't moving, and it was a disc-shaped object, maybe like a dark grey colour.
Hmm.
I didn't see any real lights on it. It was quite evident from where it was positioned. And as soon as I clocked it, I felt myself being pulled up to it. You know that feeling you get when you're on a roller coaster when you're just about to dip. That feeling
Yeah.
in the lower, the dip. That's what I felt. But it's a feeling of being lifted upwards, not going down. And as I was pulled closer and closer to this object, I then blanked out. Now, there are two more parts to this. The next part was the most difficult one for me to come to terms with. And I did suffer on national television for being open and honest about it, thinking people understood it. But of course, then back in the day, it was a circus act. But I found myself naked and hot and in a room that wasn't very big. It wasn't big as in terms of like massive. It was large, but not, and it was quite dark. But there, ahead of me, I found that I was strapped to a bed, like a clinical bed, where I could move my neck this way. So they had my arms held down and my legs held down. And I think and feel there may have been something around the neck. I'm not quite sure. I can't be certain about that, because when I awoke to find myself in this very strange environment that was hot, by the way, there was like this mist. You could see through it quite clearly, but it wasn't like it was hot. But ahead of me, I could see some light. So there seemed to be some opening to my left. When I looked to my right, the way that things had been, whatever it was, set, like we have furniture, they had something that was like molded. And I realized that it was some kind of medical room or something like this. And when I looked to my right, there were what I can only describe as three huge, very powerful reptilians. The only way I could describe it, I'd never seen them before. I'd never knew that they were linked with ufology or were meant to be there, but there were three of them, and the sight of them absolutely petrified me. Now, they were in a kind of like a thicker mist, and they were doing something very strange. They were moving from left to right together. I'm not saying it was some kind of ritual, but it seemed very strange. And they seemed completely unconcerned for me. The feeling I got was of complete, total dread. There was no empathy to them. I was just a meat on a slab. And the sight of them shocked me, because I thought, I don't know what they are. My mind's trying to register these things. But I also discover that there is something that has been inserted into the lower abdominal region. And I could feel it, because it felt as though it was inside my bowel or stomach, and it felt organic.
Oh.
Whatever it was, it felt like, and the shock of realizing this situation, then just, I lost it. I was like, I started to scream. I tried to pull away from where I was. The three, when I say the reptilians, whatever they were, they were what we would call, what you would know as a reptilian, because that's what they looked like to me.
Right.
Powerful, strong. You wouldn't mess with these guys.
Right.
Completely unperturbed. And I just wanted this thing out of me. And I screamed and screamed. And then what happened was that immediately after this wrestling, this struggle, and I was exhausted and tired, I felt the contraption being removed. There was nothing there. It seemed to be mechanical, I think, because it seemed to just come out. And when I looked to my right, the three of them had gone, but there was then a small grey. It was cream more than grey. I have to point this out. It was more cream colour than grey. It just appeared from that opening ahead of me. And I thought, oh my God, I need to get out of here. And it was quite cold within its responses as it approached me, and I realized that I was freed from the constraints that held me. I was ordered to dress in the night gear that I had that was on the floor, and I put them on because they were there. And then I was ordered very coldly to follow this, what they would call a grey, through to that area that I could see. And I realized it was like an opening. It was an opening that led through to a corridor that was this mist was there. There was lights coming from the top of it, but I couldn't see where the emanation of light was coming from. And it brought me towards what I thought, first of all, was a wall. We're getting to the last part now, which is interesting. So as I came to this wall, the grey's looking at me, and it's like it wants me out. And I'm like, you want me out? Where am I going? And immediately, I didn't see it, but I felt like it was just that 1 minute it was a wall, the next minute it was an opening. I had in my impression this big tree, this huge tree. I don't know what the tree meant. I had no idea why I was seeing this big, huge, massive tree. And then the grey was like, basically, you have to go. And I'm like, I start to get upset because I'm like, heights aren't my thing. Now, when I looked out, it started to become light. It was still dark, becoming light. So I have no idea where I was or how long I was on there for. People call it a spaceship. I suppose we use that terminology. But I could see from the height that where our conservatory was, there was a smaller disc-shaped object sitting there. And I'm like, this is crazy. And I felt this push, and I was ordered here not to look at the other two greys that were assisting me down to the ground. There were another two greys, and I thought, well, that's very strange because I've seen that one there, so why should I not look at these two? It's almost like I shouldn't look back. As I came down to the ground, this is the last part that was absolutely incredible. I saw another grey standing in front of me where the area of the patio and the pond was, and it was different. And I realized that these guys have gone, and my main focus is on this being. Now, this grey seemed to be a little bit taller, a little bit more muscular. Its face came into a more slanted point. It had not as big the eyes as the other ones that I'd seen on there. They weren't as big, but it was in a uniform, a one-piece khaki uniform. It had knee-length black boots on, and it had this pointed hat. My brother has illustrated it. It has been used in some of my works. It's got this pointed hat on its head that seemed to be quite smart, the way it was molded into its uniform. But this guy has got his arms folded like this, and he is looking at me like really angrily. And I'm like, because the craft is just above him. It was quite incredible. And I'm like, you're angry with me? I wanted to punch him, but I couldn't move and I felt where the solar plexus, I now know to be the solar plexus, it felt like I'd been punched there. I'm not saying that this thing that I called Noddy, which was a famous children's creation from the author Enid Blyton, she's passed over now, but he didn't look, he was almost like Noddy. It was scary, it was unnerving. But he stood there like that, and he was really angry with me, and I kept thinking, I want to punch you, but I couldn't. You've done this to me. And then a thought came into my head. I thought or said, people say, how did it feel? I can't record it. It was almost like I was speaking, but I wasn't speaking. It's like it's normal.
It's telepathic.
People call it telepathy, yeah.
Yes.
So I'm like asking this thing, how the hell am I able to get through locked and bolted doors or something like this? If he could tell me that, I could tell people that this is real. I could tell the world how they do it. And he looked shocked. And then he raised his head slowly up like this to the underneath of his clasp. And then he started to rasp this unintelligible, what I recognized to be like the voice synthesizer from a ZX81 unit that we had years ago. Very mechanical, very cold, but it wasn't making sense. And as soon as it froze, I then saw him coming back, because I was then back with my head on my back so I could see him frozen. And then I was coming through the conservatory, through the kitchen, through the hall, and then bang, back into my body. And as soon as I woke up, I had a nosebleed. Now, the next day, when I recounted the experience to my brother, I wrote everything down. I then started to have profuse nosebleeds to the right nostril. The doctors were going to cauterize it, but it stopped after 2 years. I then had problems with my right ear that was an ongoing problem, and some strange things happened with the medical profession with regards to that, asking me if I'd been abducted by aliens. That didn't know anything about me. Also, I had 3 triangular right marks behind my right ear. My brother tried to take the picture of that with a self-developing Polaroid camera, but it wouldn't come out. And needless to say, I found it difficult to walk. I didn't realize at that time that, I'd had what people term an alien abduction. But what's interesting is this. The thing in the ear, That's an ongoing thing and has been for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But also the fact that another researcher discovered that what was happening to my brother earlier that night, when he froze and he lifted his head up and said there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die, it appeared that the grey at the end seemed to be mimicking what my brother had done, bringing out this
Oh,
unintelligible language. So
yes,
I can't say too much about that at
of
the moment
course.
because there is an investigation ongoing, and another researcher, Pearson, that has brought some incredible parallels to this that's quite interesting. So we may be dealing with something that's a lot older than ourselves, and comes in and comes out on this level, but that will be revealed much later when his book comes out, and I will be allowed to use the material in a new UFO book that I'm working on. So that was now, with regards to the advent of that so-called abduction, and I say so-called because we don't still know what it is.
Right.
People label something, they say, and we understand it like near-death experience to be what they call an abduction.
So, right.
My then curiosity was, how is it that there was one part that was physical, in the sense that I was able to see this grey thing all in black, clad in black, coming through the door,
Right.
and then the other part where they're able to take me. Now, this then fueled me with a passion and a drive to find out what it was we were dealing with.
Right.
And this then led in 1996 to finish off here with a download. I think I had the only one where I seemed to be graced with some kind of information with regards to the greys and consciousness and the replication, maybe the inherent dangers of cloning and individuality, this type of thing. And I wrote an article, sent it to Alien Encounters, which then was a magazine here. I think it was published in the States for a while, and they called it revolutionary within its speculation, because I called the article Spirits in the Material World, which dealt with the abduction phenomena and the grey. So that was the abduction.
Wow, that is profound. The fact that you could remember it
Oh,
with
yes.
such great detail.
Every detail, yeah.
Why do you think that they would let you recall that? And I put it that way because so many people will say, I have no recollection. And with that being said, I've heard, like different theories saying, well, if you've asked not to remember, they'll take that away from you if it's too traumatizing, or if maybe you've learned something that they don't necessarily want. If anybody
Yeah.
got a hold of you, they wouldn't want you to
Yeah.
pass forward. I'm thinking, okay, but it seems to be a really big amount of the population.
I remembered all of it.
Wow.
And
Wow.
also, I am very hard to induce with hypnosis. Someone tried it before, because I am a hothead sometimes. So I want facts. Sometimes it takes a lot for me to, I am like that.
Right.
Whether or not that was part or key to it, I don't know. But I think that perhaps they wanted me to remember it. And I think that there were reasons behind this now looking ahead, because you'll find that a lot of folk out there who are an experiencer, an abductee, a contactee, whatever category they fall into, you will find that their lives are profoundly changed. And this is the key element, I think, when we are addressing this phenomena. And it is a phenomenon because we don't know where they come from, what they're after, why they're here. But it's interesting that for me, recalling that in its rawness, sometimes they do say that when you've been through a traumatic experience, you come out a changed individual. You survived the process.
Yes.
And sometimes it can be like a wake-up call for us because, and it's like, back in the day, dare I say it, where you used to get a slap, which wasn't too bad. If you've done something wrong, it created pain. It's like, oh, I remember and learn not to do that again.
Right.
So, I'm not, now you're not allowed to say boo or anything to anyone because it's an offense to anyone. But, in our human conditioning, when we've gone through an experience, a very difficult experience, we do often come through as changed. Now, when I say they, I mean these so-called reptilians, whatever they were, felt that what they were doing was necessary. What they were after, I have no idea. Nothing was explained to me during the process. In fact, there was more questions than answers. But what fascinated me was the way that they were able to take me and also in a way that, you know, they, from their end, they'll probably think, no one will believe you anyway. You know, no one will understand what you're talking about. So I think these multiple experiences operate on an individual basis, rather like a near-death experience, where someone will have a different experience from someone else, but there are key elements that connect the dots to say, yes, this person's had a near-death experience, even though the experience itself was very different in terms of the interaction with whatever or whoever. So I think for all of us, we are trying to mold this into boxes, or a few boxes, and saying, right, this is what this is and that is what that is, when I think the key element is and operates on a more personal level of conscious interaction, as it were, with the individual. So I think that, you know, when you talk about the intergenerational link, and there is another author, I just have to say here, called Steve Aspin.
Oh, please, yes.
Who, I don't, but his book here, Out of Time, Steve Aspin here in England. And he has had some experiences. A wonderful man, I have to say here. I'm not advertising, but I just have to say to your good people that the book was stopped for his book was stopped for publication for some unknown reason, and he's got another publisher to publish it. He knows a lot of the key researchers, and so Out of Time. So look out for that book, because a lot of the things that occur, I think, with all of us, we share and we help each other to understand this greater reality. So I think the intergenerational element is key to a lot. Now that's fascinating, isn't it?
It's very fascinating. And I'd like to add, going back to the glass doors.
Oh, yes.
I have a researcher friend, who's our producer, owner of the station, actually, Joe Montaldo, has been in the field for about 30 years. And he said to me one time, because when I was having some experiences, our home, relatively new compared to the homes of England, but it was 1872. And he said, when you get into really old glass, and he said, it's been in our experience in taking photos, if you take photos of the glass, because somehow the composition is just different than the new glass of today, you know, and he said, you can actually capture images in them. So if you're being pulled through, people have taken photos and actually been able to see imprints of images. It's just something to maybe, you know, try with your research, because you guys are so much older than we are with respects to architecture and so on. And if it was an old building, you know, 100 years plus, he seems to think that, you know, original windows. So we've yet to try that, but I thought that's actually very fascinating. If it's a thing, it goes, yeah, it just seems it's a molecular thing. It goes, you just take.
Oh, yes. And I might add here, what's equally bizarre is that when the psychic component kicked in, I had performed a mirror experiment through a book, no less than called Reunions by and I forget his name now, Dr. Raymond Moody. Sorry, Dr. Raymond Moody. And I did this mirror experiment to see if I could get someone through from the other side. And that worked in 1999. And what also worked a year before that, on the 8th of June 1998, was us, me, my brother, my twin brother, and friend Susan, summoning through an experiment a UFO at Rendlesham Forest. So think about this. When I look back now, I've written about it and it's all documented. When I look back now, it's to do with the mind, it's to do with consciousness, the builder, the creator, the opening, the access point. You know, you're summoning dead people, you're summoning UFOs. What is this telling you? That there are windows that seem to open and you go through, or they come through. And I got that idea from Karen Carpenter's song Calling Occupants, of all things. I wondered whether or not that was possible at the time. So I think there's synchronistic elements, synchronicity with all of us individually, uniquely so, in terms of where it's all very well when you're going through the experiences, you have no idea what's going on until you reach a point where you take a step back and you think, oh, I wonder, and you're reading about all these other wonderful folk who've been through their experiences, whether it not be astral projection or, you know, their meetings with benevolent extraterrestrial intelligences, or they're going through a bad experience. And one person said to me quite cruelly, he said, the only reason that you had a negative experience is because you're a negative person. And I said to the individual, I said, let me tell you one thing.
Right.
I said, I am the least negative person on this planet.
Right.
And, and it's not because I'm, was picked out by one of the bad guys. We don't know. But what I'm saying is that, we obviously belong to them, or we are part of what they represent. They have the right to do what they're doing, or they feel that is their right.
That's right.
We, as a human species, are relatively young. We're new. But I do believe that we have been lied to in terms of historical content, in terms of our antediluvian cultures and background. And I think this is why the public have been deceived. This is why one of my books called You, the Public Deceived, The Grand UFO Deception, why the system has deliberately falsified information and made us all believe that we are younger than we're led to believe in terms of genus, when actually we're a lot older.
Yes.
And I think so when, people start discovering these truths, which the system is at pains to not tell us, and I think that might reveal a lot of what really has been going on.
I agree with you. It's again, you go back to ancient cultures, you see it in petroglyphs, you see it in ancient monuments. You look at out of place artifacts, things of that nature. We're not the first kick at the can on this planet. That's for sure. We're several ways in, and I think we have to realize that maybe we are very much a part of them in many different ways. And I hate to put this crudely, but when we have, our pets that we love or our loved ones and we bring them to the hospital, your doctors, hospital staff will sometimes do uncomfortable things with our pets, for example. And because, the Buddhists believe you can incarnate as an animal, as a bug, as anything, if you follow the Buddhist faith. But it just shows that we can come back in any form, not just on this planet, not just in human form, but elsewhere. We take them to the vet, for example, uncomfortable things are happening. Could it be that this is what we are to them? We're just, if for their people, there's a strong belief that not everybody has these experiences, but those who do, they're, especially when you're talking ancestral lines of this happening to you, there's something about you. Maybe it's that negative blood type they all talk about. I'm a negative blood type. I'm an I'm an experiencer. My family's negative blood types. So have they been. But it's not always, I'm not saying it's just us, but what is it specifically, like you say?
Well, that is interesting. Now, let's look at it this way. As we understand, the Greys, as far as we're aware, cannot reproduce. One of the things I discovered back in 1996, some years after the abduction itself, was that I found it curious to know or understand that the Greys seem to be interested in reproduction, hybridization.
Yes.
And I thought it was very strange for a species that themselves could not reproduce. Now, we are a productive species, and we are individual. That is our uniqueness and the signature of the soul. One part of my research did consider the fact that the inherent dangers of cloning and being left outside the laws of creation, as it were. But there are several hypotheses that we can take with regards to the Greys, at least, and not least of all the things that have already been addressed: us from the future, those from the other world or the lower realms, as it were, hell, and so on and so forth. Every category has been explored. We are still no nearer in our understanding. But what was interesting for me was what we are as a species. Now, we're talking about the Greys, and we're left all scratching our heads. Fascinating subject, absolutely intriguing. And, someone said to me once quite coolly, you're like a kid on Christmas Day. It's like, yes, I am. He doesn't know which present is the one that's more useful to him. It's fine. He's absolutely right. He's agreed on all points. But as a species, what do we represent? Now, we don't know enough about what we are, where we come from, and I believe, like so many, that our true genus is not the Sunday school version that's been dictated to us down the ages and has been embossed within our minds and used with fear to control through God that's going to destroy you and all the rest of it. The Greys are interested in our species, and our species, I believe, is precariously once again on the verge of collapse. And when I say once again, I'm talking about those epochs that have not been addressed: Atlantis, Gomorrah, all
Yeah.
these different epochs that
Yes.
are, whisperings. Now, I could even go so far as to suggest that perhaps that we are a byproduct of creation from these Greys, that we could look at them not only just in the other areas that I have addressed, but
Yes.
also as geneticists, creators. And that if you think about it, the human experiment has not fared well. And I say that because most people, when they address us as human beings, yes, we have the love and light, we have the goodness in people, but we also have the others that are not.
Right.
And if you look upon our species as well, we're not the most kindest of species. Now, has our species come to an end? And is there some kind of program that has been initiated on a maybe perhaps an ultra-terrestrial level that is wanting to recreate a new genus, something that is able, part and parcel of alien and human, that is able to exist beyond another sphere entirely beyond this realm? We don't know. But what is interesting and key is the fact that the Greys themselves come across as beings that own us, that has that right to do what they need to do. But we don't know enough about the intergenerational links, what it is that they're after. And I'm a very interfering person. My mind is always going into these areas like, what are they after there? What do they want there? What is it? And as I said again, very gently, I will not step on anyone's belief system because that is sacred. But
I'm of like mind with you. Yes.
I'm allowed to think like so many outside the box, to find out what is going on, what they are, where they come from, and another point in question, which is fascinating: where are they? Now, when we ask that question, where are they?
Yes.
Think about that very carefully. Now, also the fact that we have Greys, we have reptilians. I've seen them.
Yes.
We have the tall whites. Yes. We have the mantis. We have all these different
the light beings.
And the light beings.
They've been here. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Totally.
Yes.
Now, this is interesting. This is fascinating. We also have the dogman. We have the Sasquatch. We're going into other areas although we tend to separate each category into alternate fields of investigation, understood.
Yes.
But where are they? Now, this is the thing. This is the key. We may be dealing with interdimensional or ultra.
I was just going to say, when are they? As soon as you said,
right.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you.
So this is now beginning, as for us as a species, to question, and I think it's wonderful that people are beginning to batter that iron door that's been closed about people want disclosure.
Right.
And we're beginning to see a breakdown within the system's way of containing that information, because there are more whistleblowers that's coming forward that's wanting to break this whole secret situation down. They want to pull that wall down and reveal it for what it is. And I think that one of the reasons why the system is at pains to tell us, the public, about what is going on, because it will find it very difficult to do so. We have been programmed from birth to believe in physicality, to believe that this is our lot, that consciousness is limited only through its 5 senses and through observation.
Well, we've been suppressed even in our food.
Absolutely. And that's another thing, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So I think that they will not be able to, because they're going to find that, I know, and many other good folks out there know, but they're going to how will we inform those members of the public that will not be able to wrap their heads around this? Where are they coming from?
Yes. Yes, I'm completely of like mind on all those levels. We're conditioned in many ways from the time we
Absolutely.
are children, you know, whether it's guiding us in faith, whether it's
Yes.
guiding us through educational, which is broken in many places.
Oh,
Both
yes.
can be very broken.
Mm,
I've always said you have to find your faith within yourself. You don't need an institution to tell you how to feel for your to
absolutely.
source or your creator, whatever that case may be. There have
Correct.
been cultures that have existed for thousands of years that our indigenous people still today go out and have their belief systems. And I prefer to go the course of spiritualism. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to go sit in the forest and I'm going to connect
Yes.
with nature, and which connects you to all. It's just, I'm funny like that, but I truly believe that our evolution is to evolve telepathically,
Mm,
psychically,
mm,
because that's how they communicate. And
absolutely.
the animals know it.
Mm.
You know, there was, if you remember Carl Sagan.
Yes, yeah, Dr. Sal Carl Sagan. He wrote the book Contact. Amazing film, by the way. I love with Jodie Foster. Love the film
Oh,
Contact.
that was fantastic.
Love Jodie Foster. Brilliant
Yes.
actress. Wonderful, wonderful actress.
Fantastic, fantastic film. But what a lot of people don't know is he and other scientists started an organization called the Order of the Dolphin. And the Order of the Dolphin was created because they believed that dolphins could communicate with aliens. And if you remember the old Star Trek movie with the
Oh, yes.
whales,
Whales. Yes, I remember that
the
one.
same idea. They were looking for the humpback whales.
Yeah.
So moving forward, they believe that the dolphin, just through language, can communicate with the greys, other
Mm,
species of extraterrestrials. And what I found interesting is there are stories of saucers coming over the water in the ocean and dolphins congregating underneath them and just being very vocal.
mm.
And I remember at one point, because I do have equipment that speaks, and when you make mention of, trying to call forward, I've done that and have phenomenal audio recorded.
Yes.
One of them, in speaking with a individual, I believe, from wherever,
Uh-huh.
somewhere in there, I started hearing them talk amongst themselves, and it sounded like a chirping. I'm going, sounds like a bloody dolphin.
Yes.
So, and I started researching and came across the Order of the Dolphin. So other species on our planet are very capable of communicating.
Accept us. And this is what
Except
is
us.
primarily
Yes.
the issue. This is why we are so far removed from the rest of creation here.
Yes.
And not always in a superior way, I might add.
No.
And I think that everything that we see around us in terms of the paranormal, you've quite absolutely aptly stated it yourself, communicate through mind. The only species that does not is the human, to a degree.
To a degree.
There are those individuals, very blessed individuals who are able to some degree, be able to control thought.
Yes.
And we're beginning to realize that through the power of thought, through consciousness, through liberation, and through a lot of practice, that we can alter our sense of reality.
Yes.
Now, if you had told someone that 10 or 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, they would have laughed you all the way to what we call the leads.
Mind blown. Yeah.
You'll find now that it is true. I have tried the application myself. It is extremely difficult to remain within the moment, to try to visualize what you want. But let me tell you, it's happened a few times with me. And I do condition myself every single morning now. It's very hard, into a positive framework, because we're so used to and programmed into all this negativity, which is drawing our consciousness down, which is suppressing consciousness, which is not allowing us. And I know that you said quite rightly, through the food administrations and God knows what else, through the atmosphere. But you are your own God. You are your own creator. We're all part of that process of interconnectivity, and perhaps on multiple levels of reality. One of the things that I've started to do is saying to remain positive. Yes. And to look at things positive. So now going back to the experience that I had back in 1989, the psychic component had been activated later. And this then was all through the connection with my dead maternal grandmother, who was not dead.
Right.
And who had passed over at the same month and same year as Princess Diana. think it was 1997, I think that was.
Yes.
And well, she was murdered, but never mind. But
yes, that's a whole other show. Yes,
yeah, that's a different show anyway. But I will say to you that, and not everything is conspiracy. We know that conspiracy is just a
Let me get my tin hat, because I'm on board with you with that.
So, you know, I'll put mine on as well. But I think that, you know, with regards to the system that we serve, there is definitely a war, a silent war, and it is psychological in nature. Now, I said that before. I said to you before, Michelle, that what's happening now is that we, the people, are beginning to find our inherent power. We are beginning to discover our inherent greatness. We're beginning to discover that this up here is merely a tool to bring other realities into this level of awareness. If you take your mobile phone, you have the physical apparatus, the hardware, and you have the software that you can't see. It needs a little bit of energy, like us, that we need food to and water to sustain our bodies, to give us energy, and we have consciousness that operates through us. We record and we send information out, we receive information. Now, some people, amazing people like yourself and many others within your groups, your wonderful connection links, have learned to balance this, to opening it to these other realms that come through into this reality. And it will appear real to you because mind is real. Mind is reality. Everything around us has been created through an imagery that's been brought forth from the mind, the central pool of all that is and all that ever will be. So I believe that when I say, where are they? People have mistaken me, saying, oh, you just think that they're in some, you know, wispy. I thought that within my mind that perhaps you thought that they were some wispy thing on another level that can't be touched. No. There are multiple levels of realities that exist around our one, and those realities are able to temporarily reconnect into this realm with us and physically interact before it goes out again. How they do that, God only knows, but it is fascinating.
I mean, if you think about it, there are doorways, portals all over this planet. The ancients knew where many of these places were. They built their temples, you know, in and around them. You know, a lot of them, the church came afterwards, went right over top of those temples. They know where it all is, right? They're there, and there's no doubt that they come in and out. I've seen portals open up in the sky. I've seen it. They're different types. Sometimes it's just a flash that goes just like that. I'll say, okay, where are you? It's like, okay. You know, and honestly, this one time I looked and it was just like a giant arch that just went of all multiple pastel colors. And I was just like, I'm looking around, was there a storm? Like my logical brain is trying to figure out what the heck it is I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, just the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. I saw it in a vision one time, a download. So when it came to be and I started recalling, I'm just like, it looked a lot like what I had in this image that I had been shown before.
Yeah, and in Utah, Skinwalker Ranch, they also recorded these portals opening. They could see other worlds through these portals.
Yes.
And we do find also, I mean, if you think about just changing the subject slightly with regards to the Skinwalker legend.
Yes.
Is that they used a powerful belief that created that reality that obviously came into being.
Yes.
And this is why we have to also look into those aspects of the mind and creation. There is an element that in the astral planes where our human belief system, under the connection of belief and constructing thought, actually builds it on that side of life. Right. We give things life as well. As we give life, we also are given life. So on multiple levels, not just here, again, I say that our journey in this life is minuscule compared to the ever-expanding nature of our reality beyond this cosmos, through this cosmos, and into multiple levels of other realities. I mean, I have something very strange that's always happened to me, Michelle, and I could be reading a book, I could be driving the car, I could be, you know, whatever. And the image that I see instantly creates another opening of something that is kind of like more amazing, that seems to make more sense with regards to that. And this is what I get. Like there's a greater reality, a tapestry that is so infinite that we're all connected to, and you kind of like generally lose the thread of what it is because you're not told what it is, but it's there. You can sense it and feel it. You see, it's almost like in that moment of empowerment, it's like an opening that reveals itself and then closes again. And I believe that when we physically die, that is the same reality that we get when consciousness is no longer affixed to this temporary biological spacesuit. That is, all the memories come together as one, rather like the signal to your mobile phone network system. If your phone dies, all that information is stored in a cloud. I'm not saying we go to a cloud, but it's probably nearest to that. I mean, the other side. But
Right.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying here is that levels of consciousness is so amazing. So I think we're only seeing a small part of what's going on here, and we're all trying to fit it into these boxes, and the reality of that will come much later, perhaps when we ourselves pass to the other side. Who knows? I mean, we're all in search of that holy grail of the knowledge, of the information of what we look for. You'll get researchers who want to be there at the top, that own the exclusive rights, and I found it. No, the phenomena is linked with every single one of us.
Well, I think if everyone had that mentality and followed through with it, we would not be any further ahead. I think you have to share the information. That's
Oh, yes.
other people expand on that, and it
Yes.
just keeps going.
Yes.
It's in any field.
And I think it's important that you hold on to your belief. Your structured belief
Yes.
system is important to you. Everyone is trying to change how you're thinking, how
Yes.
you're feeling. And you said about God. Well, I can find God in a field. I can find God in my heart. I don't need to go to a church, although I do love churches.
Yes.
I'm not conditioned by some kind of religious organization.
Right. Correct. Same.
I, like you, am my own individual person.
Exactly.
And I think that perhaps the phenomena operates on that level of individual connectivity. You understand?
Yes, and I think it's going to become, I mean, it's already becoming apparent to me just in the things that I read or the people who contact me, that many more people are venturing out with that mindset, because
Yes.
I just think we've been through so much that many people are reaching out, to their faith, and they're looking for answers, and they're not getting the answers that they had hoped to, or they're not getting the answers that they thought they would get. So I think it's an awakening.
Yes, that's right.
It's an awakening. And more people seem to be comfortable around the thought of having extraterrestrial contact than I thought. I thought for sure that I would be reading more about, with all the fear that's been instilled into society. I thought I would be reading a lot more, like the pros and cons. I thought for sure it would be the cons, but people are just like, no, they're very open to it. The whole CE5 movement. I mean, Russian scientists have been doing CE5 since the 80s. Like, we don't have to go into space. They go to a certain base that they have, and because we call them. It's like,
Yes.
what?
Yes, and you'll
What,
find
really?
also, this is incredible, because you'll find
Yes.
that there are organizations way above us here
Yes.
on this planet
Yes.
who have access to, I think, the most incredible hardware, and no less brought through from magic. Now, we also know as well that the esoterical level of investigations is important, because I think a lot within our governing bodies that preside over us are very much into this darker aspect.
Yes.
And they've always initiated a
Yes.
darker program.
Yes.
So it could be like attracts like, and their forces are trying to go against us and what we are trying to attain in goodness, or all that is good and that is godly and is wonderful. So it does beg the question, to some degree, that most of these other factions of extraterrestrials, as we call them, those that are operating on the negative, perhaps are linked with those individuals of like minds here on this world.
Right.
And this is why that there is this constant theme of disabling human consciousness for us to progress beyond the levels, because every single time there's a species we seem to be climbing upwards and into that enlightened area, there's always something that dreadful that comes along to push us all back down again. And I think that the forces of evil are starting to slip. I think they're beginning to crack. No matter how many times that the public have been hoodwinked into this systematic control of pay your taxes, don't ask any questions, fear this and fear that, and now people are starting to wake up and think, hang on just a minute.
This doesn't make sense.
That's right.
I know.
There's more to
I know.
what you've
If
told
it goes
us.
against the grain, you need to question it. I've always said it. If it doesn't feel right, if there's something even as a smidge off to your psyche, to your spirit, if it insults your soul and your person, you need to explore it. Don't just take it for what it is.
Yes.
Explore it, whether it's within yourself or whether you're putting it out there.
Yes,
You know,
and God
so-
help anyone that speaks out or openly to
Oh.
those that have been, brought into the fold with these
Sure.
certain nefarious organizations,
Sure.
because they will be dealt with harshly.
Yes.
And you'll see this all the time, because this is the system's way of making sure that their secrets remain secret, but are not with us, because we
Mhm.
are sharp, and we are trying to put the pieces together, and those pieces are telling us
Mhm.
that, one, that we've been lied to, and there is a greater reality, or multiple levels of reality, that
Mhm.
operate outside our physical domain, or this third dimensional matrix that we exist
Mm-hmm.
in temporarily. I have to say again, only
We
temporarily.
need to, yeah, it's time to jump. I'm jumping ship, Philip.
We've got to
That's it.
get off. We've all got to get off right now.
I know. Mutiny. Declaring a mutiny. I want off this boat. I know. So let's slip into a little bit, because everything that we've been talking to, especially when dealing, dimensionally and extraterrestrial, let's talk about terrestrial trespassers.
Ah, yes.
That sounds very exciting to me. It's a very interesting choice for a title. What brought you to write the book, and why
Yeah.
the title? Terrestrial
So-
Trespassers. Sounds serious. Sounds like
Yeah,
the
well-
people we were just talking about.
Well, it could be.
Mm.
The book, the new book, is due out via Philip Mendel's Flying Disc Press
Mhm.
in February of 2024. And I wanted to write this book because I, like many other people, are very curious. I want to
Yes.
try and put the pieces together, like many other good ufologists out there, or researchers, whatever label that we're given,
Mhm.
although I've never set out to have a label or anything like that. But I wanted to explore what the Greys were, and bringing out several theoretical applications with regards to this, and looking also, especially near the end of the book, with the ancient texts, which
Oh.
talk of the connection link between our creation and perhaps even the Greys' creation. And this goes back to the time of, the antediluvian culture, Sumerian, ancient Sumerian,
Right.
and even further. And I wanted to address also the fact of reproduction, of creation, and of course the gods of old that we would call gods, Enlil and Enki, who are part of the scientific expedition that allegedly, that I believe had occurred through our man's creation, genus.
Right.
So I think we might be dealing with a force, with an energy which is much older than we ourselves take credit for. And it also addresses points of why the Greys have found us as a reproductive species, and also in line with the genetic material thereafter, may lead them also to their question of who these gods were.
Right.
Now, the book also highlights a lot of what I have gone through as well, and exploring upon also the 9th of April 2016 sighting, the last sighting that we had at 11:15 p.m. at night, with those amazing UFOs, the three of them, that made themselves aware to me and my twin brother. Massive, huge, and incredible. And a subsequent of another researcher coming forward and putting me in touch with other people who had witnessed these objects, filmed them, and that they had been tracked. And that goes more into that. And also about the cryptids, bringing into the equation the dogman. And people will say, well, how on
That's a
earth?
big one.
Yeah, now how on earth are you able to link UFO abductions with cryptozoology? Well, I'm not, but I'm making certain parallels that I think that most of the public might find interesting with regards to the dogman, the Sasquatch,
Yes.
and other elements of high strangeness that occurs during the event of a UFO appearing or the
Yes.
light phenomena coming in and distorting our sense of reality. And
Yes.
also, I think important to address the way that the phenomena seems to interlink, as we said recently here, on a personal level of psychic integration. So I think that with the book Terrestrial Trespassers, we would see them as trespassers. Absolutely. It does not in any way, promote the idea that every single encounter is negative. No. I had to take a subject matter
Yes. Yes.
and explore this. It's like, people talking about the devil and God.
Yes.
Well, our concept of the devil is somewhat quite, the man in a red suit with a fork and horns. I think we need to sit down and talk to him, and then maybe he might pour out his problems to us so we can get to the root of why this is all occurring. I'm just being cynical there. But
yes, of course.
in good and bad,
yes,
that both parts must be explored. And I will tell you that there was a religious family that I knew, very religious, and they condemned me as a Satanist because of my interest in ufology many years ago. And I said, hang on just a minute, just a moment, I said. You have to understand that your understanding of your faith and your belief, I fully respect. But you talk about this evil. I said, we must explore that in order to give us strength and an understanding of what it is that we're dealing with. If we don't have any information about this, then we may be taken off guard. They always say, keep your enemies closer. Because with your enemies, you'll learn so much more about what's really going on. And I'm not saying that the Greys are enemies.
Right.
I'm just taking the stance of a part of the abduction
Jump
phenomena.
outside the box for a
That's
while.
right. To look at, areas that most people are not willing to address.
Yes.
And another area that we have to highlight here is the cattle, end quote, with that, because we're not really allowed to use the end word now.
Correct.
With regards to that, but it is important. We can't remain closed eyes to it. We have to look and see, well, what is this? What is causing this? And why is it occurring? That is where I wanted to write Terrestrial Trespassers, in terms of understanding of this, the other side of the coin.
Right.
And of course, as I said to you, Michelle, I'm an interfering person. Once I get my teeth into something, I can't let it go.
Right.
But it does not mean that, and this is where people have kind of like highlighted me as a negative individual that's only looking at the raw bad experiences. Well, to a degree I have, because I want to better understand what happened to myself. Does that mean that I agree that all the other experiences that people have had were negative? No.
But it was horrific for yourself, and you deserve to have answers.
That's right. And if this helps understand this on multiple levels of awareness, which is still occurring to this day through research that other researchers are doing for me with regards to it, we're beginning to understand something greater. Now, doesn't that help? Because sometimes when you've been through a bad experience, you come through like, I survived that, and I've learned something from that. Was I meant to learn something from that? Was I meant to get a slap on the hand? Was I meant to be pushed in a different direction to enhance the psychic component? Yes.
Right.
Because had I not had that experience, I'd be doing a 9 to 5 job and paying my taxes and asking no questions. I am grateful.
You good little citizen.
Yeah, I am grateful that to some degree that I've had this happen and seen them at close range.
Right.
Because that has changed everything for me completely.
Right. It does. I could see that. I've talked to many experiencers, contactees, abductees. It's different for everyone. It's truly a personal experience. To try to generalize it all, try and tell that to someone who has been traumatized, or try to tell that to somebody who's had the most unbelievably elated experience, and they come back and they try to explain it, and people are just like, we've been conditioned to think the other way, and it's hard,
And as I said, Michelle, like you, it is an individual, unique
Yes.
experience.
Correct.
And I believe on a soul level, it doesn't just is here.
Correct.
It doesn't just mean to say that, we're trying to put the pieces together, which rightfully we would want to do that. But I believe there is a much greater reality, a much bigger world other than the one that we currently exist in. And
Yes.
this is why the system that we serve, damn them,
Mhm.
have done their best to destroy, control, subjugate.
It hinders the evolution.
Yes, but they,
Yeah.
be very wary to those folk out there, because you will find that what thy soweth, thy shall reap. And that is the truth of whatever God you profess to believe in. You
Yes.
cannot escape it, you
Mhm.
know. And those even on the other side are aware of that. They know any love. They understand. And I'm not saying, you're going to take yourself to a lower plane. That's your deciding. You're making the creation of your mind. If that's how you think, if that's how you feel, then you'll draw that to you.
Mhm.
But I have learned so much through the experience, and not afraid now to talk about what they call the reptilians. I don't to subscribe to the fact that there are people out there who will tell you what it is and where they come from and why they're doing this, because as long as that we accept that the reality is there, and that person believes that what's occurring to them is how they see it, I never force my beliefs upon anyone else. I say, let's be open about this. Let's listen. Let's bring everyone to the table, and let's see what they have to say. But it doesn't always work that way. And that's the only sad thing. I think within ufology itself, there's been a lot of breakups with people because they don't, one group doesn't agree with another, or this person has it all worked out and got all the answers.
Any field of high strangeness,
Oh,
I find
in any area.
It's oh my gosh, you hear so many stories. I'm like, this is just not much unity. A lot of people talk about unity, but following through is very difficult. Going back for a moment, talking about dogmen, I'd like to add this to you. I worked with a family who they were experiencing a lot of levels of high strangeness. It's a term I love to use because it encompasses so much.
Yes.
So one night they were away. Their adult son was watching their property, and he was outside because I have to bring the dog out to do his business. So the dog goes out. Dog's not having it. And I was like, I'm not doing this. No way. He's growling. He's pulling back. So he turns around and he looks up and he sees what appears to be a cloaked figure with a long snout, growling. Huge. He grabs the dog, takes off in the house, slams the door. He goes, this thing came shooting at the door, hits the door, and starts sniffing the top of the door frame. It was that big.
Lord.
Now here's the kicker for you. About 3 kilometers away, there was a sighting that came across, all the police station, all kinds of people calling in, of a craft in the area that night. Within the next couple of days, the family was probably about 5 kilometers away, had workers doing work in one of their outbuildings, like a barn, big building. And the workers took off because there was a gray on site.
Oh, my Lord.
Interesting connection between this being, this dogman individual, cloaked, no doubt, like a cloak, huge, happens to be within a 5 kilometer radius. All of this went on.
Wow.
Within 2 days.
Wow. Well, it could be that the phenomena, we could look at certain aspects very quickly here.
Of course.
It could be that as the light phenomena or UFO phenomena comes in, is it somehow distorting both space and time, leaving some kind of opening or residue for other beings to come through? Because in a lot of cases, paranormal activity, discarnate voices, like phenomena, ghosts, all this type of thing seems to affect a certain geographical location where the object, i.e. UFO, has come in.
Yes.
So, and this is interesting because we're arguing as to whether or not we're dealing with one force, which I doubt very much, that's operating all of this, like Stephen King's It, as it were.
Sure.
Or we're dealing with multiple levels of beings, of intelligences, because the dogmen are very intelligent.
Oh.
They're not just from the research that I've done, and a few of the people I've spoken to in your great country, United States of America,
Yes.
and of course with Paul Sinclair, who's a best-selling author here in England and a researcher up in Bempton, with the Dogman, and he's just finished a series, a program called Wolfland. It's very interesting because these beings are as scary as hell, and you won't want to be around them, and they're very powerful, but they're also very intelligent. There was a Joe Barger case that I was allowed to work on that's also mentioned in the book, and also another chap, Mike, who's written Beasts Between the Rivers or something like that.
Right.
He's had an experience, a law enforcement officer, ex-police mate, that had the sighting of one. Well, two actually, and
Yes.
so this is interesting in terms, and this is what Terrestrial Trespassers, going back to the book, seems to address. These levels, and high strangeness is mentioned in there, which we all know about.
Right.
So we don't know. I mean, we can only theorize as to the idea that perhaps when the phenomena comes in, whichever, whether it's the Dogman or the UFO, that somehow it's distorting or creating an opening. But what's interesting also that we have to take into consideration is the synchronistic events that occur, not just before, but sometimes after the event itself. And the way that the occupants, or the beasts, as we call them, come in and go out, they are able to physically interact with us and the world around them, and then they go out. Now, this is what we're looking into. We don't have the answers, but it's certainly an area of high speculation. I would consider that something is being disabled, or not being able to be controlled as this ultimate force comes in. Maybe it's possible the Greys are bringing them in, are the Sasquatch and also the Dogman part of the Grey agenda. I don't think that's the case, but it's close. There are close parallels towards it. So this is how I see that. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot of reports, for example, Sasquatch sightings, and the tracks just stop.
Yes, absolutely. Same with the Dogman as well. Oh,
See,
yes.
there we go. There we go. So I don't know.
We don't know, but at least
Right.
we can, and if there's anyone out there who does know, well, we're all ears, trust me.
Yes.
But as I said, I think it's interesting to have that kind of like high speculation and also theoretical content, which is fascinating no less, for us to consider these amazing subject matters and to bash them back and forwards, and even if it makes for some people a good horror nighttime story, we all like to be a little bit scared in the safety of our home, but I can assure you that these accounts, like are real, and they promote the highest levels of fear in those that witness them. And this is another area that I wanted to look into, why this is occurring, and why it is that they promote this level of fear when they're such incredibly intelligent beings.
Well,
we don't know.
I think the whole quantum aspect of it is fascinating.
Oh,
I know
yes.
we had a man on the show named Ron Morehouse, and he wrote a book called Quantum Bigfoot. And I could send you a link to the episode if you want. It's fascinating, the whole quantum, and he talks about the orbs. He talks about how they make you feel and how they can psychically direct, certain energies to you.
Wow.
The UFOs, all of that. And he's also like mine, the high degree of intelligence and the whole connection to the craft.
And also psychics. I see the lights,
everything.
But they are smaller.
Yes.
There are different colors. We don't know what they are. They could be the dimensional opening of the deceased, or they could be consciousness or whatever. But the phenomena itself, they come in larger light phenomena, bigger light phenomena.
Yes.
That's interesting, isn't it?
It's all fascinating to me. Then, you start looking into the missing 411.
Oh, yes.
Throughout national parks, throughout the United States. And there have been, situations where Bigfoot has been somehow sighted, or areas where they have found Bigfoot prints where people have allegedly gone to disappear. Like, there's just a lot of different connections. So does somebody just slip into a portal? I don't know.
Well, Yeah, I can assure you of one thing. I would love to do that, but I would like to come back again, because most of those people don't. You see, they don't come back.
No,
So
it's true.
God knows where they go. God love them. There are
It's
some
true.
terrifying events that have to be addressed. We cannot
Hmm.
shy away from that.
That's right.
And we need to know what's happened to these people, why it's happened to them,
Hmm.
and looking at the different aspects of the phenomena as a whole, not just the good, the bad, but also the ugly. It's
Best.
important. It's no
Yes.
different from, I mean, I'm not putting myself in light of a psychologist, but a psychologist trying to determine, or criminologist, a killer, to
Hmm.
what goes on in their mind. You know, they analyze cases, and
Hmm.
one person said to me, you know, you just, all you do is rehash old cases. No, I don't. But you'll find that some of the old cases are the most important, because what we're looking for is key elements, patterns that connect
Hmm.
the dots from one to the other. That is why researchers look and dig up the old cases. It's
Hmm.
not because they've got nothing else to write about and they're bored and they bring it out into the open just to
Hmm.
sell their books. No, there are reasons behind them. I had one chap approach me, he's passed over now, Don Schneidenberg,
Hmm.
and he was involved in a military experiment with an isobar, and also all to do with the Roswell crash in 1947. Now, his experiment was to see how he could survive in this self-contained environment, and also being ingested with some kind of food that was like a fluid that gave him apparently longevity. And he argued and fought for this, saying that they had retrieved some of this material on board the Roswell craft, if it's to be believed. I mean, I had all of his medical records sent to me from himself, and I wrote about that in You, the Public to See. But again, those levels of high strangeness come into it, where people weren't really interested, they didn't really want to know, and so we don't know. But as I said, we must be very careful and not be too submissive of those who come forward and claim these things. We have to
Hmm.
look into them, and okay, we get a few bogus people. I've had them, you've had them, people who claim all
Sure.
sorts of ridiculous things. But you meet the real gems that come forward, I can assure you, that have a story to tell, and always it's like a bottle of wine. Why is it
Hmm.
that it takes years for it to mature and then people are interested in it? I've always often wondered why that is.
Right. Well, I think if you grew up, in a certain era where you weren't allowed to talk about it,
Yes,
you know, I don't think a lot of those cases or experiences were ever investigated on a level where researchers can investigate
that's
today.
correct.
The only
That's
people
correct.
who were investigating them, if if they got a hold of them, would have been military,
That's right. Absolutely. Yes, and we know what
government.
happens there.
Exactly, right?
Red
That's
tape
another
and
show right
silence.
there. Yes, exactly, the duct tape across the mouth,
Yeah,
that's it.
that's it.
So
Lovely.
now people, it's oral history.
Yes.
They would talk to family members about it. Those family members are now the ones, in some cases, that are coming forward because their family members told them, or maybe if they were fortunate, got them to write it down, do a drawing. So now you're coming in because it's more acceptable now to do this in the last, how many couple of decades, definitely not the
Yes.
Roswell days, but now
Yes.
as a researcher, and you can look at it with fresh eyes because you're
Yes.
more knowledgeable, because it's more spoken about. So you can go back, pick it
Yes.
apart, and maybe
Yes.
come up with a conclusion
That's right.
that never would have been possible before.
That's right, and of course, I think this is fascinating. We're living through amazing times now because we have access to more information. I mean,
Yes.
even as a young lad, I took myself to the library to dig out the very few titles of UFO books that were
Mhm.
available at that time, and one of them had been about Roswell, and I
Right.
did a project on it, even all the way back then, all those years. So I think for all of
Right.
us, there is a part that's ingrained within our consciousness, and going back to that soul level, where we're being conditioned to a degree, or we're evolving and then being developed to a point where they will then come in, and I think this is fascinating. I think intriguing. So yes, I mean, we're all of us are, again, as you say, avatars. We're all
Yes.
researchers in our own right, those that are looking for the answers, trying to piece this parts to this complex puzzle together. But
Mhm.
however complex, it is not easy. One man said to me, and I have to say this, I'm sorry I've got to say this to you, Michelle, oh, it's all very simple. And I wrote back and said, I think it is far from simple.
Right.
I think you'll find that this phenomena operates on very high levels of high strangeness, and the phenomena comes in forms of multiple faceted natures of dimensions of reality. So don't tell me that it's simple, because it's not. It's
No.
highly complex and very sensitive in many cases as well too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's also amazing, and I love it. And I'm like a kid, yes, on Christmas Day, wanting to find out the truth. And I'm very honored also to be linked with a lot of brilliant minds, not only here in the United Kingdom, but also in the United States of America. There are some brilliant people who are there and really are incredible. So I have them to thank incredibly for that.
Well, I think you get an amazing network of
Yes,
people that makes the difference, because at the end of the day, we have become a species with amnesia.
that's right. Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
you look at, like I say, we go back to, the Atlanteans, the ancient Lemurians. We have a lot of ancient cultures that they already knew all of this.
that's right.
These cultures are long
Yes.
gone, and somewhere along the line, we don't remember anything. We should be knowing where a lot of these power spots are. We should know what to do with them. We should know how to communicate telepathically. We should be far more advanced than what we are, and we're simply not.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say to you that with regards to our understanding of those ancient cultures, I think that when the truth comes out, we will be able to understand a lot more about what we represent, and also a lot more about what the phenomena represents as well.
Yes, I agree with you. And maybe that's why you were chosen. There is that belief that there are those of us who are chosen to be
Yes.
contacted in
Yeah.
however way that may be, because of the fact that they know we will research. I research, and I also offer a platform. You offer a platform in your writing, and we basically are here. We're talking about, we're educating people, and people are coming forward, and it in turn helps with evolution.
Wonderful. And I agree with you absolutely, Michelle.
Yes. Okay, quickly now. I know we're coming down to the end. So tell everybody how to reach you, how to find you, what you're working on, what's coming up for Philip Kinsella.
Yes, I'm currently working on 2 other books, UFO books, for 2 different publishers. Terrestrial Trespassers is out next year in February of 2024. And I've completed some work for television. That there's a documentary coming out about me and my twin brother through EM Productions, I think a little bit later this year. And it's called, I think, something to do with the biological connection, alien encounters, this type of thing.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure. I would love to do this again.
Yes,
Move
and I would
along.
love to very much indeed as well. Thank you. Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. So thank you, and have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and I have to thank you very much for having me on your amazing show.
Thank you.
I really am grateful to you, and we've had a wonderful chat, and
Yes.
I hope that your audience will like it as well. Thank you so much.
There we go. Put that up for good measure. Have a great evening, everyone, and have a fantastic weekend, Philip. Thank you
Thank you very
again.
much. God bless.
Pleasure. All right. Good night.